All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're breaking down a truly fascinating piece of text, Christopher Silvester's chapter, The Interview. Whether you're deep into your exam prep and need to know this inside and out, or maybe you're just curious about how the media actually shapes our world, this explainer is built to give you all the essential insights directly. We're going to explore the massive power, the actual purpose, and the really intense controversy surrounding one of the most common journalistic tools we have today.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting these 5 sections. Meet Christopher Silvester, the interview debate, chat with Umberto Eco, key themes and ideas, and finally, essential chapter vocabulary. Let's get started.
Section 1. Meet Christopher Silvester.
So what makes him an authority? Well, Silvester brings some serious journalistic chops to this piece. He didn't just study history at Peterhouse, Cambridge. He literally spent a decade grinding it out as a reporter for Private Eye, while also writing high-profile features for Vanity Fair. He really knows the industry from the inside out. But you know, his most relevant credential for us today is that he edited the Penguin Book of Interviews. This is a massive anthology compiling interviews spanning all the way from 1859 to the present day. The text we're studying right now is actually an excerpt from his introduction to that exact book, so we're getting a highly curated expert lens on the subject.
Think about the immense power those traditional tools hold. Just a simple pen and paper. It's wild, right? This perfectly captures the underlying tension we're about to explore. The very real battle between the reporters holding the pen and the public figures they're writing about. It's a relationship entirely built on dependency, but man, it is often fraught with anxiety.
That brings us to the interview debate part 1.
130. It has been over 130 years since the interview was actually invented. Think about that time frame for a second. In that time, it's become an absolute commonplace of modern journalism. Silvester points out that almost every literate person alive today has read an interview at some point. Thousands of celebrities have been subjected to them, often over and over again. But despite being so deeply ingrained in our daily news consumption, opinions on whether they're actually a good thing vary wildly.
So here's the crucial point. There is a stark contrast in how interviews are perceived. On one side of the debate, journalists like Dennis Bryan see them as a highly serviceable medium, a vivid art form with unprecedented power and influence. It's how we get our most intimate, vivid impressions of our contemporaries. But on the flip side, celebrities often view interviews as an unwarranted intrusion into their lives. In fact, Silvester notes that some cultures superstitiously believe taking a photograph steals a person's soul, and a lot of celebrities feel interviews do the exact same thing to them. They feel wounded, like they're losing a part of themselves to the public eye. Let's look at some highly emotional reactions from famous authors to see what I mean.
Take Lewis Carroll, the legendary creator of Alice in Wonderland. He absolutely refused interviews. He had what is described as a just horror of the interviewer. He felt this profound discomfort at the idea of being overly admired or lionized by strangers. The thought of people picking apart his personal life horrified him so much that he actually took great satisfaction and amusement in successfully silencing anyone who aggressively sought his autograph or an interview. He drew a firm line in the sand to protect his private world.
Then you have Rudyard Kipling, the celebrated author of The Jungle Book. His stance was even more aggressive. His wife Caroline noted in her diary that 2 reporters from Boston had literally wrecked their day. Kipling equated an interview to a physical assault. He called it cowardly, vile, and immoral, saying it's something that actually merits punishment. Now, the irony here is off the charts, because just a few years prior to making this fiery statement, Kipling himself had perpetrated this exact same assault by interviewing the famous author Mark Twain. It really highlights how your perspective changes depending on which side of the notebook you're sitting on.
And then there's Saul Bellow. Unlike Carroll, Bellow actually did consent to interviews on several occasions, but he clearly hated them. He used this striking metaphor, describing interviews as thumbprints on his windpipe. It's a phrase you definitely want to remember for your exams, because it perfectly captures that suffocating physical discomfort authors feel under the relentless media spotlight.
Let's transition over to part 2, chat with Umberto Eco. In this part, the chapter shifts to an actual transcript. Journalist Mukund Padmanabhanan sits down with the fascinating Italian professor and novelist Umberto Eco. Mukund is completely amazed by how much Eco is able to accomplish in one lifetime. And Eco? He reveals a brilliant secret to his massive productivity. He works in the interstices. What does that mean? Well, these are the small, empty spaces or gaps in our lives. Eco gives a highly relatable example. If you're taking the elevator up to his apartment, that time you spend in the elevator is an empty space. Eco says he uses those exact tiny moments to write articles, process ideas, and think deeply. By capitalizing on these tiny intervals that most of us just waste, his overall productivity absolutely skyrockets.
But Eco flipped the script in other ways too. He totally revolutionized academic writing. Let's be honest, most academic writing is dry, boring, and completely depersonalized. When Eco presented his first doctoral dissertation, instead of just giving the hypothesis and the conclusion like everyone else, he told the story of his research. He actually included his false hypotheses, his mistakes, and his trials and errors. He maintained an informal, narrative approach. His professors loved it, and he realized right then that scholarly books should be written as narratives. This naturally laid the groundwork for him to start writing actual fiction novels much later in life, at the age of 50.
Now here is a fascinating paradox about Eco's self-identity. Despite writing over 40 scholarly works, most people only know him for his 5 fiction novels. When asked if this bothers him, he straight up says yes. He states, "I consider myself a university professor who writes novels on Sundays." Even though his novels brought him global intellectual superstardom, his core loyalty belongs firmly to the academic community. He attends academic conferences, he identifies as a scholar, and he actively avoids Writers' Club meetings.
And speaking of that intellectual superstardom, the contrast between expectations and reality for his novel is staggering. Eco's book, The Name of the Rose, is a dense detective story that delves deep into metaphysics, theology, and medieval history. His American publisher loved it, but only gave him an advance for 3,000 copies, basically assuming American readers wouldn't buy a complex book about medieval Latin monks. The actual result? It sold between 10 and 15 million copies worldwide. No way, right? Eco explains this by saying publishers and journalists mistakenly believe readers only want trash or easy reading. This massive success proves that millions of readers actually enjoy a difficult, challenging reading experience that treats them with intellectual respect.
Let's step back and look at the bigger picture with key themes and ideas.
We've covered a lot of ground, so here's how to organize it all. First, the ethics of journalism. Are interviews a legitimate pursuit of truth or an unwarranted invasion of privacy? Second, the power of media. As Dennis Bryan noted, the interviewer holds unprecedented power because they shape our vivid impressions of public figures. And third, public versus private identity. We saw this clearly with Lewis Carroll and Saul Bellow, that intense struggle of celebrities who feel their private selves are being suffocated by the public's demand for access. If you connect these themes to the quotes we discussed, you'll build a really strong argument for your exams.
Let's wrap up with our final section, Essential Chapter Vocabulary. First up is lionized. This simply means being treated as a celebrity or being excessively admired by the public. Remember Lewis Carroll? He actively avoided being lionized because he had a horror of interviewers and just didn't want that uncomfortable, excessive public attention disrupting his quiet life.
Next is semiotics, which is the study of signs and symbols and how meaning is created. This was Umberto Eco's primary academic field as a professor at the University of Bologna. It was his foundational understanding of semiotics that he brought into his academic writing long before he ever wrote a piece of fiction, which is exactly what allowed him to weave those incredibly complex layered narratives.
Finally, we have yarn. In this context, it doesn't mean knitting. It means a long, often improbable, and really engaging story. During the interview, Mukund refers to Eco's famous book, The Name of the Rose, as a detective yarn. It's a fantastic word choice because it beautifully captures the storytelling essence that Eco deliberately brought to both his fiction and his academic research.
So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. If you were a famous author, how would you react? Would you view the interview as a powerful art form to share your ideas with the world, or would you feel like Saul Bellow, treating it as a suffocating assault on your privacy? It perfectly sums up the intense duality of the interview debate we've explored today. Keep thinking about these ideas and you'll do absolutely great. Thanks for learning with me today.